Hey, hello there. In this tutorial I want to talk about node etiquette. So for the past few years I have been building these node setups and tools, and I have found a structure that works the best for me. Maybe some other structures work better for you, but I want to lay out how I set up my nodes and what rules I have for myself to make everything clear. And also, if somebody wants to edit my nodes and add sections and functionality, then it stays very easy to do that. So if we look here at this node setup, this is the node setup for the stitch generator. And if we go in here, you already see like a clear structure. And what I try to do is I try to take every section and just put it in a frame and give it a name. And also some rules that I have for myself are that I try to keep everything clear in where the noodles go. So for example, here you see that these noodles, there's not a lot of tension on them. So they flow nicely. And also I'm using the grid function here with the magnet to snap everything to the grid. And that makes it look very nice because it's all aligned. And also I try to minimize using these reroute nodes. Sometimes I use them when I want to have a nice clean straight line so you can easily follow where it goes. Usually I try to not cross my lines too much, but in a complex setup as you see here, you cannot really avoid it. What I could do, for example, with this one, like this vector is going into a few places and it also has some very long lines, I can store it as an attribute and then call upon it here, for example. So I don't need this really long line. But by doing that, also your nodes become a little bit less readable, to my opinion. So here you can clearly see where it comes from and where it is going and where I use this vector. And then also by coloring your frames, you also get more clarity. So if I make this one the same gray, for example, you won't see that there's a separate section here. You could also collapse this into a node group, so it becomes like its own separate node, like a chunk of data. But I usually only do that when I want to reuse it, the same line of code in separate places in the same node group. So I did it here, for example. This is the stitches part. So here you can see all the different stitches that I have here. They are determined by this node group. And this node group is everywhere the same. Only I transform them a little bit in a different way, and I copy them and I combine them with join geometry nodes to make them into this menu switch. So then for me it was logic to create a node group. But I also always do to really make it look like a tool is collapse everything into one node group. So you can also easily call upon it if you need it in your project. And also if you want to adjust anything, you just go in and there it becomes complex. So at first sight, also if you are a beginner, there is no big complexity in your node, but when you dive in, there you can see the complexity. And also here it's quite readable also for someone who doesn't know a lot about nodes. So this section is about projecting stuff on an object and storing these vectors. Here I create instances from them. As you can see here, instances on point. These are all the different stitches that I created. And then here you have an animation, the animation of the stitch being stitched. Then here you have the rotation of all the stitches. So it's clear enough. Also, what I do usually is when I want to figure out which part does what, because sometimes not super clear from only the names, I just cut the last noodles. So if you have a join geometry at the end where you are joining all the parts of your setup, then when you cut one, you usually see that there will be parts missing and you know what it does. So here, this is the seam, and then here these are the creases. The creases are not on right now, and this one is the stitches. So this makes it very easy for me to know what goes where. Also, of course, you can use a viewer node, and if you plug that one in, you will see what part is what. Sometimes it doesn't really work when you use a whole node setup, and going in here, I think here I must have the selected one. Let's go back into our node. So that's not always ideal. So then sometimes I just cut one of these noodles and then I see what is going on in my node group. So this is how I set up this stitches node. For example, I also have this one. This one is a smaller node, a lot less complex, and also it looks a lot neater, a lot nicer. And that's because I also like the aesthetics of the nodes, so that I keep everything clean and so not too much tension on the noodles, and I try to align all the different nodes and boxes, so that also makes it a lot more readable if you want to change anything. Also, these nodes, these noodles, you can change the tension if you go into preferences. Here at themes you have node editor, and you can like increase the tension, but I really don't like how this looks. This is becoming very tight. Also here you see that it's less readable now, so I usually leave it at about 4. 5 is also good. So for me this is readable, and also it's you can leave out a lot of these reroute nodes. Sometimes I use them here and here to make the lines look more clean, but sometimes what I see people do is also something like this, where they really want all lines to be straight, and that's not very handy, because if you want to add a part here in between, for example, like you have to also take all these reroute nodes, and it's very easy not to select one, and then you get like a different kind of style, and like you have to grab a lot more if you want to change anything. So I would really try to avoid it and leave the tension in the nodes and leave them curved. I like these curves, so that's why I'm just taking away usually the unnecessary reroute nodes. I try to use them only when necessary to make more clarity and to make the nodes maybe look sometimes aesthetically more pleasing and more readable by that. So what I also try to do sometimes is something like this. Here you can see this small node setup where I work in columns. So I learned this from someone who made Unreal Engine nodes, and I saw that he used his setup to make, like when you have it like this, it becomes very spread out, but when you stack them, I think it's still readable enough, because this becomes a column. Like this whole procedure, it's just one thing, and if you spread it out, sometimes it becomes less readable. So that is why I try to stack them sometimes. And also when you stack them, it's easier because now this is not in the way of creating a frame which I can name. So if here I can name it, this is the extrusion like this. Am I in the wrong? I need to go here. Extrusion. And also, like what I always do is, because the black on the black background is not that readable, I just tick color and then it gets a nice gray color. Also, when I try not to use really these kinds of colors, because then sometimes, or actually a lot of times, you get a very ugly color scheme. You need to have a bit of feeling for color to keep that nice as well. So I just leave it at gray. And for example, when I want another part to be in there, to have another frame in a frame, I just use the same gray again, because then it's more readable. At least for my opinion. So now here you have a nice column. Here there's a nice column. And here also you see the flow of the lines. Here I'm using these reroute nodes to make it also not cross my other nodes. So that's why I sometimes do this, to just lead the noodles around certain areas. And also here I think it looks nice and readable. And also what you can do when you do Control H, you can collapse your nodes. For example, in the stitches node, like I have a lot of parameters here. And if I open this up, here you see when I leave it like this is really messy if you have these everywhere, because I have here a group input, I have here a group input. Here is another one. When I leave them open, there's a lot of unnecessary data on your screen, so I collapse them. But I only do that for the group input. If I go back to this one, when I do it for all my other nodes, now it's not very readable anymore when you close them. So when you go into a node and you see everything closed and you don't know what values are being used there, that's not very handy. So I just leave them open. So if someone comes in now, they see, okay, the scale is 1, the cube is 0.2 and 2 vertices, and you can see it just in one view, one side. So just leave them open if you are building something. Sometimes you want everything to be closed if you don't want people to see what you have done. That can be a thing, of course. But for my nodes, I want everything to be readable for everyone. And if they want to adjust anything or implement something, then you can easily do it. Also, when you work with someone to build nodes and you're collaborating, then this is a good approach, I think, to just give someone your nodes and they can tweak things and keep the clarity in your node groups. So this is for me how I set up nodes. These are some rules that I'm using and how I am building my tools. And yeah, I hope this is useful for you if you are building your own nodes and you want to keep clarity. And I hope to see you in the next one. Okay, bye.